이 힘을 보아.
와우, 너무 신나는데?
절대 놓치지 않겠습니다.
Hey guys, what's up? Today I'd like to take some time and talk about one-shotting Banshee 11. This is going to be a video that's mainly for newer players, which kind of contradicts itself because most people will tell you that you shouldn't farm Banshee 11 at all until you're very, very late game. But let's be honest here, with your Charles that you pulled on the last banner, or let's say you pulled your favorite waifu that absolutely needs a counter set, you're gonna farm Banshee 11 like mad. I never actually took the time to build a normal Banshee 11 team. I went straight for the one-shot, and I'm gonna show you what I did, and maybe it helps you build your own units. Now the thing with these types of guides is that you can't just replicate what another player does one-to-one because there's way too much RNG involved, right? So you got your units, and then obviously you need your gear to roll a certain way. Obviously, you can't start talking about gear if you just don't have the units. So the biggest RNG factor is definitely, do you have the right units for it or not? With gear, sure, it's RNG how it rolls, but at least you can control where to look for gear and what kind of gear you upgrade. In the long run, or maybe in the short run, if you're lucky, you're gonna get there somehow. Now with that said, this guide is going to focus mainly on the gear. As for the units and specific comps you can run, there's quite a lot of info out there. In fact, I'm going to leave a link in the description to a Reddit thread where another user actually went quite into depth on what types of comps you can use, how to configure your team, which variation to run. There's lots of stuff, you know, target, def break, 1 cleave, 2 cleaves, watch a Schuri, no watch a Schuri. It doesn't matter. He covers it all. It's a little bit outdated. It doesn't include Vivian, but other than that, it covers quite a lot of information, even tells you the gear requirements you need for each different one-shot unit, and it's really quite helpful. So go check that out if you're interested in different comps and how you can set up your team. This guide, though, is going to be very comp specific. You saw the comp in the background in the first clip. That's the team I use. And the gear I'm going to go through with you today is obviously also tailored to that team. Just take away the essence of what I'm talking about and apply it to your units. So this is the team I'm running. Even though I said I'm not going to go into specific comps, I'm just going to preface this by going a little bit into the very basics of how a Banshee 11 one-shot team may look like. Usually they consist of 1 attack buffer, 2 or 3 turns, in my case Helga, this gal, then 1 cleave who takes care of the first wave, an optional debuffer and supplementary damage if you need it. That's going to be a target debuff or def break. And then last but not least, your one-shot unit, whoever that's going to be. Obviously, you don't need these specific units to pull it off. Like I said, there's lots of variations. And if you don't want to go through the entire guide that I linked in the description, use Charles for your cleaver and use Vivian for your attack buffer. Just having those 2 units in the team, or even just one of them in their respective roles, is gonna lower the gear requirement massively. Like, Arby isn't the best choice for this, because he deals basically 0 damage to the boss itself, whereas Charles would do a ton more damage with his S2. And then Helga, she only has a 2-turn attack buff, which means that your cleave, in this case Arby, doesn't have that attack buff anymore once he goes up against the boss. So that's more damage that you lose there, that you have to make up with gear. So yeah, Vivian attack buffer, cleaver Charles, and the rest is whatever one-shot unit you have. If it's watch a Schuri, you don't need the def break, you can just use the target, like here with Wanda. And if it's not watch a Schuri, then you're gonna need the def break, whoever that's gonna be. So, we're actually just gonna go into the gear right now, and let's start with watch a Schuri. He's the backbone of your team, because he's the one who's gonna one-shot the Banshee. Now, there are 3 sets that directly amplify your damage. Attack, crit damage, and rage. Now, assuming that you're a relatively new player, chances are that you don't have good enough crit damage gear or rage gear. That means that most likely you're only going to have access to really good attack set gear. Now, before we go into each individual piece, let me just briefly cover what the stats are that you need on your Watcher Schuri, or your one-shot unit in general. it's going to be the same for every single unit, no matter what you use. The only 3 stats that you need are crit damage, attack, crit chance. Crit damage, first priority. In my opinion, the most difficult stat to stack on any unit, especially if you haven't been farming Banshee 11 for a long time already. Then, attack. A little bit easier to get. Crit chance, on the other hand, is not as important as the first 2. You can think of crit chance as a boost to your consistency. So let's say you go into your gear, you find the best gear that you have with crit damage and attack, you put that on your unit, and you barely one-shot the boss. Now, if you only crit 60% of the time now, that still means you're gonna succeed in 6 out of 10 runs, which is still a hell of a lot better than running a normal 10-minute Banshee team with frickin' Jacked in it and still ripping to the boss seconds before he goes down because your potion vial didn't proc or something. Now, if you prioritize crit chance, if the damage just isn't there, then your 120 crit rate isn't gonna do anything for you. Now that we know which stats we need on this unit, we can go through each slot, and I'm gonna tell you, just in case you don't know, which main stat you have to look for in every slot, and which subs can roll in which slot. So these are the stats that you can roll on each slot of gear that you have. As you can see, most of the gear on this unit is from the arena shop, and that's also the first place I'd recommend you start looking if you're looking to build your one-shot unit, because the arena shop actually gives you quite a decent set of attack gear. The first 2 pieces you'll definitely want to pick up if you didn't already are the ring and these boots, because they come almost with perfect subs, just the right main stat, attack percent on both of them, and they both have crit chance and crit damage in the subs. For the necklace, I picked up the crit damage neck, also from the arena shop, which also gives you 2 usable substats as a bonus. The chest, this is basically just the chest that I got from the Adventurous Path quest, the very final piece of gear that you get. It's definitely the worst piece of gear on this unit. It does have the 2 subs that are important, but they rolled really low, so probably you can do better here. Now the helm, I did get quite lucky, I won't deny that. It got 3 out of the 4 usable substats, which is pretty insane. But just for clarification, this could be even better if it were attack percent in the last slot instead of defense. Then as the weapon, you're always going to have flat attack as the raw stat. I picked up this sword just to complete my attack set, because that's worth 35% attack in itself, which you'll need every bit of damage that you can get on your unit, so that's definitely worth it. 2 of the subs on this piece of gear are good, attack percent and crit chance. Didn't roll that great. 1 into attack percent, and that's it. The rest went into other stuff that we don't need for this purpose, but yeah. So as you can see, just by getting a ton of arena gear pieces, I was able to gear Watcher Schuri to a point where he can one-shot Banshee 11. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to work exactly the same if you try that, because it's all RNG, I get that, but maybe it helps as a reference for where you can start looking for gear, what kind of gear you can roll, and who knows, maybe your one-shot unit is able to pull it off just like that. As for the artifact, you'll definitely want to use Iron Fan if you use Watcher Schuri. Even a plus 15 Iron Fan is better than a plus 30 Portrait. In order of priority, it would be Iron Fan. Even if it's just plus 15, it's your best choice. Then it would be Portrait and then Tonfa. Now if you don't have Iron Fan, you're gonna have to make up for the lack of damage with your gear. So if you've ever wondered what kind of stats you need on a Watcher Schuri to one-shot Banshee 11, just take these exact stats, think of this Iron Fan as a plus 18 Iron Fan, and your Watcher Schuri is gonna deal exactly 72% of the Queen's HP. Okay, so this is Watcher Schuri, most important unit in the comp. These are the stats. You can use them as benchmarks. It's just enough to one-shot the Queen. Now, one thing I'm going to say is that you only need the 3 stats that I already mentioned, but you also want to make sure that your Watcher Schuri is as slow as possible, because every other unit in your comp will have to go before Watcher Schuri. So if your Schuri is slow, it's going to make speed tuning your team way easier. Next, let's go to the cleaver. I use Arby, and these are his stats. I'm gonna keep it shorter here and just add that next to crit damage, attack, and crit chance, on this unit you'll also want some speed. Now obviously it doesn't have to be this exact gear, you just want to make sure that with an attack buff, your cleaver can consistently clear the first wave, is fast enough to not get blinded, and can deal some damage on the boss after clearing the first wave. Since the cleave, at least in my comp, goes second, you'll want to be slow enough to allow your attack buffer to easily be faster, but you'll also need to be fast enough to outspeed the first wave of Banshee adds and allow for Wanda to be positioned between your cleave and your one-shot. Now let's go into the attack buffer. I use Helga. I don't have her built right now, so I'm just gonna preview what she usually looks like. Yeah, I think this is what she looks like. I hope I'm not showing you something that's different from what you already saw in the gear showcase. I gotta check that out later, but I'm pretty sure this is what she looks like when she's equipped. So this is the gear. She's the attack buffer. She has to go before RB, and then as much crit chance and attack as possible. As for your one-shot and your cleave, there's a certain amount of damage that you just have to deal with that unit, otherwise the comp doesn't work. With the attack buffer and your supplementary damage or your debuffer, it's a bit more variable. So all you need to do with those two units is help your cleaver, who goes first on the boss, bring the boss into the range at which your one-shot unit can one-shot the boss. That's gonna vary heavily depending on how much damage your cleaver and your one-shot unit deals. The more damage they deal, the less damage you have to do with the other two units. Now obviously the main concern with your attack buffer is gonna be speed. But other than that, it's just really putting as much damage on her as you really need. Another thing I'd recommend you do is, if you've decided on a team comp, only max molar the skills that you need for the one-shot and the cleave, and leave the skills of your supplementary units alone until you have them reasonably geared. Because if you leave the relevant skills that they're going to use on the boss unmolared, you'll have more flexibility later, once you got the gear on them, to push the damage up just a little bit in a controlled manner. I found that it's easier to do it this way than max molaring all the skills you need and then struggling later with finding the right pieces of gear, because now you deal a little bit too much damage. And then last but not least, we have Wanda. As with Helga, you need crit damage, attack, crit chance, only to the extent that you need to make up for a lack of damage by your one-shot unit and your cleave. What you need for the debuffer is mainly the correct amount of speed, in that it has to go before the one-shot but after your cleave. Now sadly, as of her specialty change, you now need effectiveness on her. With Wanda, again, it's quite helpful if you wait with your skill ups, because you have quite a bit of flexibility with her S3, lots of upgrades. If you don't have tons of gear that you can play around with, it definitely helps. I just realized that I completely forgot to talk about artifacts for your other units. Just to quickly go over them. So Watcher Schuri was Iron Fan. On your cleave, you'll most likely want Tonfa. And then on Helga, I run Midnight Bloom. It gives crit chance to all of your team members. Definitely make use of that. And then the other one I'm using is Card of Small Miracles. This is definitely a very good artifact because it increases the attack value of all of your allies, and again makes it a little bit easier to gear your units. So yeah, that's everything I wanted to cover for now. I hope you were able to learn something. Hope it was useful. If you have any other questions regarding setting up your team, gearing your units, looking for gear, anything really, you can always ask me and I'll try to help out as good as I can. Once we get the next free equip removal, I'll probably test out Charles. I got him max leveled, max awakened, but right now he's on counter and immunity just for PvP. Haven't tested him out as a cleave yet, but I will definitely do that. So there's gonna be an update on this video, and then we'll be able to see how much better he performs than what I'm running right now. If you're interested in that, look forward to that, and until then, thanks for watching and see you next time.